Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not on the tablet today. I think, oh, okay. Now it says we're streaming live.
perfect.
Or are you looking at the page?
It's up in the
there
left-hand
it
corner.
is.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
should pop up on your own screen as well. Let
Mhm.
me get you guys back. Excellent. Well, I want to welcome all of you panelists today. Thank you for joining me on Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to everybody out there listening and to you guys. Before we get started, I'll, as in typical fashion, read our disclaimer. Our conversation today is going to be about breeding, but also raising puppies and getting them ready for the show ring. So thank you so much for joining me. If the feed goes down, I'll get it up as soon as I possibly can. I want to remind everybody out there the purpose of this forum is social in nature and is to be an encouraging learning environment and a call to action in the breed of dachshunds. We each have our own individual responsibilities and accountabilities with this session. Our conversation will be diverse with different opinions and perspectives. That can be a great thing. It can also cause confusion or feelings of disagreement, and that's good as long as it's respectful. Those of you out there listening, please participate in the conversation through the chat box, but please don't dominate the chat box as an individual. It helps me field the questions. Questions and comments must be applicable and relevant to our conversation. And as just a reminder, I will get to the questions that you put in the feed at the end of our conversation. So if I don't get to it right away, be patient with us. We will not have questions or commentary that is not directly related to the subject or things of a personal or political nature. This event is being live streamed on Facebook and will be available to watch after the video is over. You must be on Facebook to participate. And our big disclaimer, this event is not sponsored or endorsed by any formal organization or entity. While we invite judges or other authorities, this should not be deemed as official education event, nor should it be interpreted as authoritarian in content. So, with all that mouthful said, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time for us today. As usual, what I would like to do is go around and let you introduce yourself and your kennel name and what you breed, how long you've been in the breed, who your mentors are, things like that. So feel free to introduce, and I can take volunteers or I can just start picking and we can go in a consistent order. It's whatever's easiest for you guys.
I can start.
Okay. All right, Nancy, go ahead.
I've really had two different careers in dachshunds. I started when I was just a kid, and we got a little pet, chocolate and tan, Smooth. And when I was in 4th grade, my piano teacher decided that I should go to obedience school with her. And so I did. And she eventually became the 25th dachshund in AKC history to get her utility degree. So that's really how I got going to dog shows and paying attention to dachshunds. My mother and I kind of got interested in conformation. We got the American Dachshund magazine. We went to specialty shows, that kind of thing. And we especially fell in love with miniature wires. And so we saw this beautiful little dog in the American Dachshund named Champion Ellen Bush Jiminy Cricket, who happened to be owned by Sherry Snyder, and he was shown by Yvonne Chessodian. And we contacted his breeder, Ellen Bourgeois, and she sold us a half sister to Jiminy Cricket. At the time, we lived in Davenport, Iowa, and the dog came all by itself and landed at the airport there and got off on a crate, in its crate, and was carried to the terminal, and then the plane flew off the other direction. And we had our little Georgette. Well, Georgette didn't work out as the show dog. She never got 1 point, but we tried to breed her, and through breeding her and having her puppies evaluated by the stud dog's owner's handler, who happened to be the very famous Bobby Fowler, I got more into conformation showing. He evaluated 2 of her puppies and said, I was about 17, I get the impression that you would really like a dog that can finish its championship. And I said, yeah, I'd really like that. He said, well, I have the dog for you. I'll trade you these 2 puppies for Spanky. All right, now Spanky was known as None Such Lonesome Stranger. And we took Spanky home. And he said, and by the way, if you'd like to work for me this summer, I can teach you all about grooming and showing and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I did. I worked for him. And because Spanky was my first champion, he was good to his word. He did become a champion. That's how I got my kennel name, Our Gang. For those of you that are too young, there's a very famous old television show called Spanky and Our Gang. And that is a Our Gang comedies. And so that's kind of how Spanky turned into my kennel name, whatever. And then I got a second standard wire bitch from Bobby's breeding. He had bred a bitch of his to the famous Pontiac's Hobgoblin by Nancy Onthank, Rose Farm Kennels. And that kind of got me connected with the Hutchinson. She hired me away from Bobby after 2 summers. She said, I'll pay you double, even triple, if you'll come and work for me. And so I said, well, that sounds pretty good because I work pretty hard for Bobby. It's not a glorious job. I learned a lot, but as you know, taking care of a kennel and so forth isn't all that much fun. So anyway, I did. I went to work for her in Poundridge home. She and Bruce went sailing every weekend. So I had dog duty and kid duty during the summers between college. And because of that, so I got this little chocolate and tan wire bitch. She was, I knew the owner of the bitch, and Bobby and she co-owned the bitch. And I just fell in love with this little chocolate pig in the litter. But Bobby told me I couldn't have her because Nancy Onthank was going to have her. All right, I went, oh, okay. So I was very upset because I just fell in love with this little dog. But anyway, about 6 weeks later, he knocked on my door. I lived in Suffield, Connecticut at the time, my parents, and he said, here you go, here's your dog. And he kind of tossed this little puppy into my arms. And I started to cry because I really wanted her. And the only thing is you have to co-own her with Nancy Onthank. I went, all right, that's fine with me. And so anyway, so a combination of me, Dee, and Bobby, we got Patches finished. She was a very pretty bitch. She was a pinwire though. She had no beard and no whiskers, but she had a Brillo coat. Anyway, and I bred her. That was my first real litter with using my Our Gang prefix. And I got 4 puppies, and one of them looked really, really good. And Bobby said I should sell it as a show prospect to people in Minnesota. And I did. And he had a pretty bad, he got loose one day on the streets of Minneapolis in the city, and got terrified, and they had to sweep him out from under a car with a broom. Yeah. Anyway, he was a mess, so he came back to me. And we rehabilitated him, and then Bobby showed him, and he finished him in 5 straight shows, all majors. And then he tried to special him, but Slow Gin Fizz was out at the time with Jerry Riggin, and didn't quite work. We weren't going to beat Slow Gin Fizz. So that kind of ended that time. I was finishing college. I graduated and kind of had to start my career in teaching. I'm a 37-year veteran teacher. And the dogs had to take a back seat. So they did, as I got my career started. Then I met my husband, and he wanted a dog. And by this time, my other dogs, Patches and Spade, they were all old dogs, and my parents were taking care of them. And so he wanted a bigger dog. We got, in the meantime, we wanted a child, and I couldn't get pregnant. And we adopted a little boy, my son Dan, from Chile. And he kind of grew up in this kind of dog show world. In fact, his first words were dog show car. That's what he called RVs. Oh, dog show car. So anyway, in the meantime, we got this Labrador Retriever. And then we got a Doberman Pinscher because I had always wanted one from the time I was a kid. And she, the lab, it was bought a show quality, but again, that didn't work. The Dobie, however, was gorgeous. And because I wasn't exactly graceful running around the ring, we did have Terry Hunt and Linda Milta show Reva for us. And her biggest win is she did go winner's bitch at the host club to the national, over 149 bitches. And I have to say that was very exciting for me. And then after Reva, when Reva passed away, my son, it was an empty house. We had no dogs whatsoever. And my son said we had to get a golden retriever. He was 6 years old. How can I say no to a kid, right? So we got a show quality golden retriever, but I couldn't, after paying Gwen and Terry all that money, I couldn't afford to have the golden show. So we just, he was our wonderful pet. And when he was about 6, I heard Dachshunds calling me again. So I said, you know, I really need a Dachshund again, Stephen. I said, I want a Dachshund. And so I called Dee, and she said, come on down. I got puppies. So I went down to see her, and she had a litter of 3 mini long hairs. I told her I wanted a mini long hair. She said, why a mini long hair? You're a standard wire person. And I said, no, I really want a mini long hair. I've always loved them. So she said, well, I've got 3 little bitch puppies here, and they're only 8 weeks old. But, you know, come down and see them, and in a month we'll pick out the one for you. And that's how I got my foundation bitch. And so started my second career in Dachshunds. That's me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nancy. Kristen, let's go over to you. Can you introduce yourself for us, please?
Okay, sure. I'm Kristen Seihus Williams, and my kennel name is Kindertackle. It's a German word for children's dachshund, and I breed standard smooth dachshunds. I've been in this since I was 25 with our first home that we purchased in San Diego County in 1992. We wanted to get a family pet. It was exciting because we had just purchased our first home. And our kids were really little. In fact, Emmy wasn't even born yet, for those of you who know Emmy, who shows dogs also. We wanted a big dog, but our homeowners association had a rule that they had to be 25 pounds or under. So I wanted a large breed, but we complied with the homeowners rules, and we went with the biggest dog in a small package that we could find, which was a standard dachshund. I always loved the smooth, so that was an easy choice. And the reason that my kennel name is Kindertackle is my kids basically grew up with dachshunds. 3 of my daughters did junior showmanship at one point. I tried to get my sons to do juniors and got them AKC junior numbers, and they wouldn't have it. But my 3 daughters, you know, different levels of involvement. Emmy was very into it and did it all the way through her juniors career. Sage did it to a certain extent and found other events and activities in high school that interested her more. But all along, we had the kids and the dogs together, and I still get a kick out of when we go to the shows and families come up and they want to pet a dachshund. We usually have somebody that when we're done showing, they can go ahead and pet our dogs. And I prioritize temperament because to me, that's very important that the dogs need to be sane household companions. I think I've bred 48 conformation champions. I've bred 5 or so field champions that are also dual champions, have gone absolute. We started doing field trials in 2015, so we haven't been doing it very long. Dogs that I bred and sold to other people have achieved AKC therapy dog titles, barn hunt titles, earth dog titles, obedience and rally titles, you know, about training. And as Emmy likes to joke, my version of training is bringing pups down to her to try to leash train them. So those are dogs bred by others. As far as my mentor, it took me 8 years to find the right mentor. I started out with one look that I thought I loved, and I started speaking on the phone quite a bit with Betty Anderson. This was Betty Anderson of Von Arby. Back in those days, before there was social media and even before email, what we did to get in touch with people is we would call breeders and we would make connections that way. So I called Betty on the phone quite frequently, and she always talked to me about a wonderful dog, Seeger, who was champion Fleming Star of Wonder. And I eventually met Polly and her dog Seeger at that point. He was starting to become an older dog. I also saw his son, Mikhail, who was being campaigned still at that point. And when I saw those dogs, I knew then that was the look that I loved. And for those of you who are new, Polly Fleming was a well-known breeder judge whose first dog show was in 1944. She was in the breed until 2013, so that's basically a 70-year stretch in the breed as a well-respected breeder judge. She had standard smooths whose breed type could be recognized at a distance. They had a very distinctive outline, prominent forechest, correct movement, very, very typey heads. And I love that. I just love those dogs. Her top producing bitches were behind all of the great dogs of the 60s and the 70s, the Dunkeldorf dogs, the Felsheim dogs. And with Polly, she was much more than a mentor that just simply sells you a dog or corresponds with you from afar. She not only evaluated my puppies and told me exactly what to do with them, whether grow them out some more or maybe find one a nice pet home, but she was a mentor that let me travel with her and learn from her. The first time I ever went to a DCA that was long distance, I stayed with Polly, Beth Ann Mills, and Carrie Meddy. And we stayed up into the wee hours of the night. And Polly came into Carrie's room at 2 a.m. We were watching a movie, and she knocked on the door and giggled that we were having a sleepover. So, that was Polly. She was a lot of fun. She had a keen sense of humor and lots of little tricks. Like if you ever sat with her at a show, and she was very, very quiet when she would evaluate each dog. She'd watch the dog on the table and around the ring as a spectator. But if you looked at her catalog later, you'd find out what she really thought about each and every dog. And it was a wonderful way to learn by going to shows with her. The first time I ever went to Westminster, I stayed with her, and it was a wonderful learning experience. Emmy was able to show some of her dogs. She finished a class dog for Polly that was a little difficult to finish, and she actually showed a few specials for her when she was only 12 years old. Emmy even traveled on her own with Polly and Beth a few times, and that was the first time I actually trusted anyone outside of our family to travel with one of my kids. So, during that time I was breeding and then closely line breeding on her top producers, Seeger and McHale. Polly encouraged me to line breed very closely on these dogs to set the breed type and outline that I admired. And every dog I have today goes back to those top producers of Polly, and I really have to thank her for taking me under her wing and showing me the ropes. I think that's probably, otherwise I'm going to run into the other questions.
I didn't get into the mentor part yet.
Went too far. Well, sweet. We'll come back around to that question as well.
Okay.
Ryan, welcome. Can you introduce yourself for us, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Horvath, and I started out in Dachshunds in the early 90s, more officially. My mom, Janice Marty, who since passed away, had dabbled in showing dogs back when she was a teenager. Her family always had pet Dachshunds back in the 50s and 60s. And she would hop on the bus and take the dog with her down to the state fair, where she would show at the Badger Dachshund Club way back when. And, it's funny just hearing her stories about it. And, she would enter every class that she was eligible for without realizing what a complicated problem that creates when you're showing. And just, she grew up, she moved on with her life and got a career, and eventually had my sister and myself. But as we were growing up, we always went to the local dog shows and enjoyed the spectators. We go with our aunt. It was kind of a family affair where we would all hang out at the dog show when it was in town, whether it was, the Cudahy Kennel Club or the Wisconsin Kennel Club that I don't believe exists anymore. We would head to those local shows and have a great time. And we've always had pets, whether it was cats or snakes or hermit crabs. I mean, you name it, for an animal, we've had it as we were growing up. And it started with Dachshunds, that my parents, while my sister and I were at my aunt's house overnight, they bought a tweenie Dachshund from a pet store in Milwaukee, who we named Luger. And he was a very large, unattractive, but cute, dappled Dachshund. And so he was so much fun, and it eventually turned out that you could get him registered with AKC, but he came from a puppy mill in Missouri. Looking back on it, we realize all this now. But we got him registered just before the year cutoff where you couldn't register the dog anymore. And I started showing him in junior showmanship in the early 90s. And it was quite a learning curve and quite an experience to, be by the Dachshund ring confirmation and look down at the end of my leash and think that, oh my gosh, they're almost two different breeds here. But I enjoyed showing him. And at the same time, we had a Harlequin Great Dane that I showed in junior showmanship. And so the first time I actually went in the ring was with this Harlequin Great Dane. And when my parents took us to the show that morning, it was at the Cudahy Kennel Club back in the early 90s. My dad wanted to get there early so we could get good parking. And so we paraded this dog around the show site all day long until juniors went on late in the afternoon. And when I got in the ring, she wouldn't stand up or move. And it posed quite a problem as the whole class had to run circles around me, literally. So I'm surprised I even made it back after that. What seemed like such a humiliating experience. But then I decided to show the Dachshund instead because it's a little bit more manageable that I could just pick it up if it didn't want to walk. And so from that, I was doing the juniors primarily while I was in high school. And my mom was pretty active in wanting to find a more competitive Dachshund. So we got a lot of support with people in the Badger Dachshund Club at the time. And we were active members of the Cudahy Kennel Club. And as a kid in the sport, you start to hang out with just about anybody who would take you to a dog show and, that were kind to you. So, it would be like such a great way to get, around the area and take my little dappled Dachshund out to the shows and unsuccessfully, for the most part, compete in junior showmanship with him. We ended up getting a couple of different dogs from different people that we showed a little bit, but really didn't have much success with. We had tamed a miniature long hair from Hannah Heller early on. And she kind of forewarned us. She says, you're going to have a hard time with the mini, and especially as a new exhibitor and as a kid going in the ring. That was definitely the case. And at the same time, my mom was really enthralled with mini wires as well. So kind of simultaneously, we got a really nice miniature wire from Emma Jean Stevenson at the time, and she was very supportive and helpful. And a little bit later, we ended up meeting Dan Harrison at a local dog show after my mom had contacted him. She had noticed as we were going to shows, she's like thinking, those are beautiful dogs, and you can really tell them, like they kind of have a mark that, from Dan Harrison's Boondocks line. And so we contacted him, and he was very willing to meet with us and sell us a dog. And so we met him at a show, and he had several dogs, and he pretty much was like, you can take your pick of, these array of dogs. And so that really started our standard long hair breeding. I would help a handler out in the area, Carlos Puig, and who I'm sure everybody watching this would at least recognize the name of, if not know intimately. And that really, I would say, changed the whole trajectory of my involvement in dogs. So I would help him, ringside, and just be so excited if he'd let me stand there and hold one of his dogs. As a kid, it was just like, oh my gosh, he even recognizes me. I was so excited. And eventually, as I ended high school, I went to work for him as an assistant. And the caveat was that I had to go to college while I worked for him. And so I went to the local college that was there, Lewis University, and I went to school full-time to obtain my bachelor's degree at the time in psychology from that school. And then when he moved his kennel further up north in Illinois, I went to a state school in Wisconsin. And my mom was much more actively involved at the time with my dad, and they would whelp most of the litters that we would have and, raise them and take care of them. And we'd have guidance from, again, various friends that we've met along the way and mentors that we can talk about later, including Carlos and, other local people within the Badger Dachshund Club. So we primarily stuck to the standard long hairs. And then my mom really enjoyed the miniature wires. So we kind of bred both of them simultaneously, had some success and really enjoyed it. And once my mom passed away, maybe about 7 years ago at this point, I wasn't really able to breed because I was living in an apartment in San Francisco, up a flight of stairs, and that's not really conducive for having a litter of puppies. I was also working full-time and going to school full-time as well, earning my master's degree in psychology. And then for several years, having to obtain my hours to get licensed as a therapist. I was barely available to even, brush my teeth, much less have a litter of puppies. So I had my one dog who I still have. She's pushing 16 now. And I'm hoping now that, I've got a career in place and a little bit more stable, that I can again get much more involved in breeding as we move forward. That's about it for me right now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ryan. All right, Melissa,
Oh boy.
it's your turn.
Let's see. My start's a little different than most, I guess. I did have dachshunds as a pet since 1975. I was 5, so shows my age there. But I had a late start in getting into showing because my parents basically just bred a couple of litters here and there for pets. But I've had dachshunds since 1975, and then in about 2000 is when my husband and I started our kennel, Raybos. We actually had a different name at the beginning, but it was too close to some other people's names, so we had changed it. So Raybos, which is an anagram of our last name Swarb. So I used the same letters and made something unique with it. And I'm basically an introvert, so going to shows scared me to death. So we made several mistakes in the beginning that I'm not even going to get into. But we met some pretty decent people over time, and finally got to where we thought we needed to go home and just kind of learn what we're trying to do here. So I went home and just started reading books. I started looking at, I'm a very visual person, so I started looking at the structure of the dachshund, the bone structure, and I thought, a really cool idea would be to take the bones and draw them, overlay them on the computer and do a flash animation to kind of show how a dachshund's supposed to move. And I really learned a lot from that, because when you start attaching the bones in a pivot area and then put it in the wrong spot, they do these, really high steps, or, they just don't move right. It looks totally awkward. So I had to learn where to place the bones. And then I created this animation, and I had shown some people, and they're like, you need to put that online, because that's pretty cool. It'd be a great learning tool. And then some people like Alicia Rezick of Orchard Wood, she suggested also doing miniature samples at the top of incorrect movement, so belly tapping and high stepping gait. And so I thought that was pretty cool. So I did the animation 2 more times inside that same loop. And then I, with the Dachshund DCA breed standard, I also incorporated, if you moused over different parts of the dog, you could see on the ears, different ear sets, correct, incorrect, feet, neck, nose, all these things, that improper tail sets. And so I put that online, and I think DCA for many years had a link to it on the DCA's webpage. And it was also used on the judges training education CD for several years. So I thought that was pretty cool. But again, behind the scenes kind of stuff that I would do to learn. I didn't do a lot of hands-on stuff in the ring because like I said, introvert. So I like to kind of keep to myself. So the other thing I did was study pedigrees. So many people were talking about lines and Packer lines, and I thought, well, what does that mean? And so I did a lot of pedigree studying before I even really started breeding. So I had pedigree database that I started basically for me. So I would go to the dog shows and I would look at the catalogs, and I'd see these names, and I had no clue who these people were. So I started buying stud books all the way back to 1880s, and inputting it in my database. So this way at a show, I could just hang on a second, and look it up and find out all the way back to the beginning what pedigrees of what dogs I was looking at in the ring, which that was so helpful. And then if later I had dogs in the ring and someone asked me my dog's pedigree, I could just pull up my phone and say, well, here's the pedigree. And they thought that was amazing. So again, you should put that online. So I had, a Dachshund pedigree database for the longest time, which really took up a lot of time. And I think it was up for about 12 years. And I never asked for a penny from anybody as far as upkeep and maintenance, but we had several people actually inputting data into it after a while. We had, gosh, I can't even remember now, hundreds of thousands of dogs in the database by the end. So I still have the data, but it got hacked. And because of that, I had to, I'm not a programmer. I'm a data kind of girl, but programming to keep people from hacking, I couldn't figure out how to do that. So it's still kind of in the wind right now, but I still have the data. So basically, I learned indoors everything I could. And then eventually I got in contact with Lil Keen and Terry Keen, mother and daughter of Dachshund Kennels in Australia. And we spent, I don't even know how many hours from like 8 p.m. until 5 a.m. because, that's when they were up and I could talk and chat without any interruptions and learned so much from them. And they actually offered me my first real nice show bitch. And I brought her back. If I had her today, she'd be a special, but I was new. So I never finished her, which is a story in itself. But I was able to learn so much from Lil and Terry. Lil's gone now, so I'm going to get a little upset. I was invited to their home and I got to see one of the dogs go best in show under Dan Harrison. And that blew my mind. And I got to take his sperm back home and a couple more dogs. I have hours of interviews with them. Wonderful people. Sorry. Anyway, I could have saved a lot of money and time and trouble if I would have met them first, because the money you spend getting the wrong dogs and spending the time in the ring with the wrong dogs or breeding the wrong dogs really costs a lot of money over time. So, I always tell people it may sound like an expensive trip to go to Australia to get your first dogs, but going to Australia was a pivotal point for me. So I was thankful to be able to breed a bitch to send back to them who went best in show at the Australian Nationals in Victoria, or hosted by the Victoria Dachshund Club. And she went best in show under breeder judge Pamela Pete of Pramada, which I actually went to bed when it was going on because I thought everybody told me who was going to win the show and it wasn't going to be me. So Gopi Krishnan of Hacienda Kennels, he called me when it happened. And I think I screamed some pretty bad words because I thought he was pulling my leg. And then fast forward to today, I've been suffering from neuropathy and kidney failure. So my breeding program is very slow. But for the last 7-8 years, I've been struggling through with what I have left. And occasionally put something out to show, but I do, like I said, a lot of stuff from home. And I do learn a lot from home, and I try to, help people from the phone and chats to establish what their, program's going to be. And that's pretty much what I do now. But hopefully, if I can figure out how to stop the hackers from getting in the pedigree database, I do plan on bringing that back out. And I guess that's it for right now.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to thank you everybody for sharing your stories. I love to hear everybody's stories. So, I just love that. So thank you very much for sharing all those. Let's kind of go back to our second question was who are or were your mentors? And I know, Kristen, you've already talked about Polly, and is there anybody else you wanted to add to that for your mentors?
Oh, absolutely. Judy Anderson was a very dear friend of ours. Unfortunately, we lost her in January of this year. The dog world took a huge loss with Judy's passing. Although Judy is more known for standard wires, I bought her very last standard smooth bitch from her last smooth litter. And actually, Brat lived to be 6 weeks short of age 17. I became very close with Judy. Again, she was somebody that, more than just a correspondence mentor. We went to many DCAs together, shared rooms together. We went to Desert Valley specialties together, and I had different perspective from Judy than I did from Polly. And I'll touch more on this when we get into actually how we socialize pups with the show environment. But because Judy had worked for Dick Beauchamp with training Bichons, she had more of an all-rounder perspective, an all-braid perspective because of her career with Purina. And that helped me too, to understand, I became involved with an all-braid club at about that same time that Judy and I became very close. And I think it's very helpful and healthy to become friends with people in other breeds because you have a wider perspective instead of just the Dachshund world. So I have to thank Judy for that because she always insisted when we were at a show, we didn't just leave after Dachshunds. We sat and we watched the groups. I mean, she was following it all the way through. And, my daughter Emmy is now carrying on her kennel name and has a whole relationship that she's trying to continue, with her first wire litter. But, Judy and I had a close friendship too. And I would consider her my second mentor.
Excellent. Thank you. Nancy, let's go back down to you. I know you talked about Dee and Bobby and Nancy, but what are some of your other mentors that have helped you?
Yeah, well, my main gal is Karen Dion. When I started as I said, I started with Dazzle. And of course, Dee was very, very helpful with all my first 2 litters with her. But after that, she passed away 10 years ago. And so I really wanted to breed a daughter of Dazzle, kind of out somewhere. All right. And I contacted Karen and we had a good talk. She had a good relationship with Dee and we spoke a lot. And anyway, she kind of taken me under my wing after Dee and, Bobby passed away. I didn't have really close mentors then. And so Karen's become my first mentor right now, my primary mentor. I have to say I owe her so much for trusting me, teaching me. She's taught me so much about breeding and pedigrees and really whelping. She's always there every time I whelp. Middle of the night, if I need her, she's there. Karen's the one for me. Fantastic gal.
Excellent. Thank you. Ryan, let's go back over to you. I know you've mentioned some people as well. So what about your mentors?
Yeah, I realized that as we talk about mentors, and even when I look back on my involvement in dogs, I realize that it's a whole community of people that really are influential in our development in the sport. Early on, just being kind of like in the Midwest and being a kid and really just being at the whim of where your parents are going to go. I was really initially, my initial involvement in dogs was formed by the people of like Badger Dachshund Club of the Great Lakes. So most of those Midwestern people, including Carlos Puig and Hannelore at the time, just offering like guidance and that. What really shifted was, again, working for Carlos, kind of in my early formative years in the dog world, and with him specializing in dachshunds, getting to go to dog shows nearly every weekend for an extended period of time really put me in contact with so many brilliant breeders over the years. And just being at the shows and, in grooming areas with people and ringside, getting to just talk to people just casually as you're watching a class, while you're in a class, watching a class, or evaluating litters of puppies, or when, you're taking on new dogs to be shown, by Carlos. It was really such a wonderful time to hear so many different opinions and get to learn real intricacies of different, like, Melissa, when you were talking about just like different pedigrees and looking at lines, getting to do that with, all 3 varieties, both sizes, and getting to see such a full spectrum of quality was really such an educational experience. With that said, some of my favorite, most valuable interactions have been with like Dan Harrison, who really got us started in standard long-haired dachshunds. Of course, with Carlos Puig. And he had shown dogs a lot for Kay Ladd, and getting to know her, I think she's such a brilliant mind and had been in horses back in a former life. And it was just, I found like most of my education really was formed by that group of people, but not to outweigh the numerous people who helped me just get to shows, and not only in dachshunds, but just other breeds, and, traveling with, people on, milk crates in the back of the van, getting to a show, whether it was with my smooth fox terrier friends or helping my borzoi friend show, while so she could do her brace, or, the skipper key guy who had his brace, always have to bring his extra one in. All those people I felt were really formative in helping me develop an eye for dogs.
Excellent. All right, Melissa, I know you mentioned Lil and the Keens. Is there anybody else you want to add to your mentor list?
Yeah, Alicia Rezick. I think I mentioned that already once. Orchard Wood. She sent me videotapes of Wagsmore dogs and different lines that she had used, and the progression of how things are inherited, movement video that I got to see and then send back to her with notes, which was great. Zara Boyle of Zarcrest in the UK. She's been very good to us. Let us borrow one of her dogs and use him and really add some bone and some lowness to our line that we were trying to develop here. She's also very artsy, so going over dogs with her and editing dogs out because she also does some magazine advertisements that she works with, and we had a lot of fun learning about dogs. But Gopi Krishnan, he's actually been over a few times, and I've got to spend time with him and go over dogs with Diane Paransky. Again, Gopi Krishnan's Hacienda, and Diane Paransky is Kohana, both standard smooths. I actually did have a token standard smooth for a while that I finished over here, born in Malaysia. But Gopi and Diane both had, me at Diane's house. We went over dogs. I got to feel what they were wanting to feel for, see what they were looking at, watch dogs coming and going. I learned a lot from them. Chris Lawrence, I'm gonna slaughter how to pronounce her kennel name, but it's Bow Chaser, I believe, in Australia. But she's Basset Hounds, and I learned a lot from her whenever I had breeding issues or questions about whelping a litter. She was always there. Paula Carter and Kim Padrine of Solo, always keeping me on my toes and making sure that I breed better. And every time I brought something better, I think when I brought Burdock's Brown-Eyed Handsome Man out to show as a special, Burns was just coming out. So literally the day that I had him out with a handler, we made the cut at Best of Breed, the only miniature to make the cut. But it was up there against Kim with Burns. And it went back and forth. And even Paula Carter admitted she had her heart in her throat thinking that it was going to go to Aaron. But Burns got it. And, he should have. So that was tough. But yeah, they kept me on my toes. And I don't know. I think those are the key ones. I actually have a response on the Docs Eds 101 that goes into a lot more people, like Marietta and, judges that I've come in contact with that took the time to explain why they did or did not put up my dogs. Pam Fleming was a big one. She actually explained the first time I ever showed a dog, which again, introvert, I went to Kentucky, Ohio shows to show the first time because I didn't want to do it in my own backyard, and got third place out of 2. And Pam explained why. And so I went back home and, started figuring out, what I could do about that for the next time. And then, there's the vets that I've been in contact with that they know I'm a sponge for learning. So anytime we collected a dog and they went back to go look under the microscope, I'd ask if I could go see, and they would explain what I was looking at. Anytime I had slides done or tests done, they would really take the time and let me go back in the back room and understand, or be in the whelping room when the bitch was whelping a C-section, And classes, Marcy Spalding, she was great in teaching me how to handle for my first few times. And I don't know, there's so many, but I think I listed most of them in that response if anybody wants to go look. Under Mike's Musings, I believe.
I'm glad that you guys brought up, besides just Dachshund mentors, really good all breed people. I've included some of their videos on the Dachshund site that I found helpful for me, like Pat Trotter and Doug Johnson and Bill Shelton, and some of those great people that are really master breeders in their own right and their own breed. You don't have to be specific on a Dachshund person. So I appreciate you guys bringing that into the fold. I think that's important as well. Let's go into our conversation about breeding. And just to make sure I keep the flow going, I might skip around. If you printed this list off, I might skip around if that's okay, but you guys have seen the questions. So let's talk about when you breed. Do you like to breed on the phenotype or the genotype or both? What is your formula for what you do? Was it line breeding? Is it outcropping? What's your formula for success? You want to start us off on that?
Who did you want to start with that? Nancy.
Okay, I do both. All right, I haven't really, I've been breeding long-haired dachshunds, mini long-hairs for 16 years. So I don't think that, and also I've only bred like one litter a year until recently. Did breed 2 or 3 litters this last year, but that is a lot for me. So I don't really have a formula for success. I do try to, look at both phenotype and genotype. I line breed on great dogs, and I try to breed 2 dogs together that complement each other in terms of phenotype. As I mentioned before, I have a great advisor in Karen Dion. I seek her advice all the time in terms of stud dogs. I'd say over half of all my litters that I've had, I've used her stud dogs for. Different ones all the time, but ones that would complement the bitch that I wanted to breed at that time. My last 2 litters that I have right now, they're 12 weeks and 11 weeks old right now in my house, are the first 2 litters I've ever bred where I use both my own dogs. I've always gone to outside stud dogs. And I just think it's more important about picking the best dog for your bitch versus just using the one that happens to be sitting in your house or your kennel or in your backyard or whatever. That's it. I know there's more questions about breeding coming up, but that's about phenotype and genotype.
Okay. Kristen, what about you? What's your formula?
Well, I was fortunate because Polly encouraged me to line breed very, very tightly on her top dogs. So I had this base of very tightly line bred dogs. You can do that to a certain extent. I like to line breed and maintain that look. You can get into a situation where you need to make necessary improvements and you do need to outcross. When I go out, I'm very careful. I've had genes combined in strange ways going out a little bit of my immediate line. When I've outcrossed more dramatically, I have a favorite direction in which I do this, and I usually tend to not have health issues, but I'll get a different look, and that's okay. And that's what Judy helped me with, is understanding that there are different styles and different types. And I prefer, a very typey black and tan dog myself. She always preferred reds, and she was very instrumental in getting me to understand that you can have a dog that has a different breed type, and he can be very valuable to your breeding program. And one of my outcrosses, I went very out. His mother was actually along, and it took me a long time to wrap my mind around breeding to this dog because of this. And I had a bitch that made sense to breed him to. He was a fantastic all-around solid dog. He had a great temperament. He never knew a stranger. He's still alive, actually. I shouldn't say new. He's 12 now, I believe. And he brought my temperaments around, and that's what I needed at that point in time, was to go out and you can go out and get a slightly different look in your line, and that's okay, because you can go right back and line breed again on what you know. And I took a typier son of this outcross dog, and this is my Lance, who's more reminiscent of the look that I prefer, and I bred him back to a Klaus granddaughter who was line bred on Mick and Seeger, and I was able to produce a little bitch, my Paloma, who's a best in specialty show winning bitch. And she's more what I like as far as the movement, the front. She's a step back in the direction I prefer to go. And that's the beauty of having line bred dogs and keeping a gene pool where you know you can go back in and bring that look back. But you do need, as Judy said, more of the regular looking dog. And you do have to go out and outcross sometimes to make improvements. There's no perfect line, and it's very, very necessary to outcross occasionally and then go right back in and line breed again.
Excellent. All right, Ryan, when you guys were breeding, your mom, what do you remember you guys liking to do?
Pretty similar to what people are saying. It was very much, kind of a combination of both, and wanting to look at lines and use the history in those lines to better predict what you may get, but also staying away from a dog that may have a great pedigree on paper, but you look at them and they may not have the keel or the front angulation that you're looking for. So then that might be something where you stray away, despite the fact that there's been all this good stuff back there, but you're a little bit worried about what may come out just from it being so directly related to the litter you're going to be having. The thing that I found most helpful was also realizing that, like we've said, also don't just pick people that are in your backyard or just the number one dog. We have a wide array of personalities in the dachshund world, both in people and the dogs. So you may have to reach out a little bit to someone that you may not know as well or may have competed with in the ring, but to be able to set some of that aside to do what you feel is right for the line that you're working on, I think is really important. It can be really hard for us to let personalities of a nice dog's owners or the handler get in the way of what your ultimate goal is. So I really encourage people to kind of step back a little bit and focus more on the breeding rather than the people so much. I think that would be one bit of advice that I would offer. The other thing is just what we benefit from so much more now is being able to have at our fingertips access to these photos and pictures of great dogs. And as time moves on, and with Facebook and other streaming mediums and being able to share information so readily, we're at such an advantage now to not only just work with what you can see or maybe in a publication like you might have gotten years and years ago, but now you can exchange pictures, videos, ship semen, do things internationally. And I think that it really will shape how we move forward breeding, and it already has. But I think that will just continue to influence how we breed, because what we have available is so broad at this point. It also does pose more complications because you also have to do a lot more homework and research when you have that many more options that you realize are available to you.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. Let's go over to Melissa. What's your formula? What do you like to do for your breeding program?
Today, I pretty much do a little bit of both. I do have a lot of dogs that I've stored that I want to go back and use. So I try to match up the one that'll match the both phenotypically and then add that genotypic pedigree back in. But in the beginning, I not only line bred, I inbred, and I inbred severely. For example, a father-daughter mating would give you about a 25% coefficient. I had some of my dogs creeping up on 50%, but I did that for a reason. I brought in a line from Australia that nobody was familiar with. There weren't too many people that had, 20 different breeding programs with the same line in it to know what problems were there. So I did it to force the hand. I did it to find out what I was bringing so that I didn't spend 10 years breeding it and then find out later I was bringing in something really bad. So I line bred, inbred, father, daughter, uncles, cousins, nephews, all the way down the line, and pushed it as tight as I can go. And the nice thing was I didn't get anything really bad. You know, I didn't have epilepsy and bad patellas and hip dysplasia and you know, any number of things. I didn't have any of it. So that was a big relief. And then from there, I started going out. I went to a dog that I picked out a puppy at Carol Burton's house of Burdocks, and that puppy was Burdock's brown-eyed handsome man. And I incorporated him into my line because phenotypically, when I went over the puppies with Lil Keen on video chat while I was at Carol's house, we both picked the same puppy out. She's like, that puppy looks like my puppies do, and so we figured that was a good thing. And I was able to correct a lot of things that that I brought in, some pigment issues, snow noses, things like that. EE reds, cream, chocolate. There's everything in the Australian line. And Aaron was homozygous red. Not only homozygous red, but he didn't carry cream. He didn't carry E red. He did not carry chocolate, dilute, any of these things. And I love deep shaded reds. And he produced such deep shaded reds that when they were born, they looked black and tan. For many people that ever used him, they would call me up and say, "We got all black and tan puppies." I'm like, "No, you didn't." But they would, you know, figure that out later. But then so now today I use Embark a lot. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Embark, but it's amazing to me that you know, we say we've got a coefficient of whatever, 30%, 28%, 20%, 18% on paper. With Embark, they actually do a genetic factoring of the coefficient. And I have two brothers that have been DNA tested to make sure, because when I got these numbers back, I have one brother that says he's 28% coefficient and the other one is 12. They're brothers, same parents. And the coefficient is, I mean, 12 to 28%. That's pretty extreme if you follow how coefficients work. But the 28% dog has a very high diversity, which means the genetic markers for like just biodiversity and immune system issues and that kind of thing. He's got high diversity, which is good. The more high diverse the dog is, the higher the libido, the bigger the litters, the better the immune system. The dog that's 12% coefficient, zero diversity. You wouldn't know that unless you did Embark. And so that made me decide which brother to keep. So, you know, I was actually showing both of them, but with COVID-19, I can't keep two brothers, especially knowing that one has zero diversity and can cause, you know, my line to go backwards, and one that's got high diversity that I can move forward with and actually maybe get, you know, more libido and more bigger litters. When I first started out, I had litters of 1 to 3 every time. 9 C-sections in a row, 1 to 3 puppies. I could have bought a house with what I started with. And then with Aaron and the Embark testing, my litters now are more like 3 to 6. And that means the world to me because, you know, you can't get very far breeding 1 litter a year and it's only 1 to 3. So I breed on both. Again, I'm a data girl. And so these kind of things really matter to me.
I think that's really interesting. I know that Maggie P and Tom Secor, when they did their Dachshund video of their kennel, mentioned that they breed a lot on using the coefficients information.
Yes, but on paper coefficient or Embark coefficient? Because I mean, I'm really surprised at this. I mean, these brothers, I think they should be about 20%, and they've got me at 12 and 28.
I think that's really interesting. Kristen, I know you do a lot of stuff, you know, with sitting out for tests and everything. Do you do any of that?
Any of the Embark testing?
Any of the coefficient, testing or anything?
No, I've never done it. I have more faith in physical OFA health clearances. So I'm interested to learn more about how a coefficient can vary so dramatically within 1 litter. That is interesting.
Yeah, I'm curious about that as well. So I'm glad that you brought that up, Melissa. We're gonna have to all, when we get off, we're all gonna be gonna go research it out, I can promise you. Let's talk about, you know, just straight out breeding and the genetic selection and screening. So how do you determine if you want to breed one of your bitches? You know, what's the criteria Because I know some bitches, you know, will put in the show ring and they're great winners, and don't produce anything, or vice versa. Maybe one that doesn't finish is a top producer, etc. Or sometimes you finish one and you decide you don't even want to breed her, etc. All of those things. So, how do you determine, Nancy, if you want to breed a bitch or not?
Well, I don't really have that much choice. I don't have a lot of dogs. So I keep the very best dog that I can from each litter that I have. Right now, I have four girl long hairs. One is just a baby, so obviously I haven't even shown her, or I'm waiting for her to grow up, that kind of thing. My oldest girl is Luna, and then I have Salsa. Actually, my oldest dog is Amelia. Okay, so I have those three dogs. Amelia had her last litter. I'm keeping one of those puppies, a boy puppy. Salsa had her first litter, and I'm holding on to two of those just to see how they grow out. And then Luna's going to I have Wizard from Luna that I kept from her first litter, which is a frozen semen litter. So basically, because I don't have a huge selection of bitches at I pick the best ones, I show the best ones, I enjoy showing dogs, I enjoy, specialing good dogs. So when they're retired, that's when I breed them. So I only breed dogs that are my best. I don't keep other ones. I don't have a dog that I wouldn't show, but I just keep her to breed or anything like that. I don't have room for that. My dogs all live in my house. They're all my house pets. So like I said, I keep the best dog from a litter. I see how that dog develops. I've been very lucky. All the dogs I've kept have done remarkably well for me in the show ring. And so far, they've done remarkably well in the whelping pen as well for me. So part is luck, but again, I only keep the best that I have. So I don't have much choice, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Thank you for sharing that. Kristen, what about you? How do you determine if you want to breed a bitch?
I agree with Nancy. My dogs are house dogs. I don't have a dog. I just pull from the back 40 and decide, let's try this one. And my husband, actually, he was grouchy with me. I have a 5.5-year-old dual champion that needed to be bred this year. And he was grouchy because we have two other dogs that sleep with us in our bed, and I bump litters in my bedroom. And he's very upset with me right now because we had to kick Lance and Purple out of our bed right now. So I told him maybe 4 more weeks and they can come back in. So when I decide to breed a bitch, I'm like Nancy, where, by the time we get to that point, they've had a show career. They've done, I do a lot of OFA health clearances. They've been through a few years of that. Obviously, I'm looking for things like I have to like the breed type. I have to like the movement, the forechest. But there's also that element. I'm not going to compromise on serious health issues because I don't care how beautiful a dog is, how much winning it did, what its ranking is. If it's going to go down the back at age 5, if it's going to get Cushing's disease in midlife, I don't want to do that. I've had situations where I've either purchased or bred dogs that I decided after they were finished that I did not need to breed them. So that's just part of breeding. There was one litter where I paid handlers to finish 2 of them. And I decided that is it. I am not going to breed them. Oh, well. And I know people thought I was insane, but there are just some things I will not compromise on. So, that element enters also. When I decide that a dog is right for my bitch, there was one notable time I got the progesterone result. I was actually down in San Diego at that time, and I could not get up to the Canadian border fast enough. I couldn't even book a flight fast enough. I told my husband that, I have to go do a dog errand, talk to my then 15-year-old daughter into going with me. And she called her dad as we were going for Portland. Dad, I think we're going to Washington. So I did that trip up to the Canadian border to breed to Ted and Karen Bruner's dog in 24 hours, which was, you do what you need to do. I've been known to get on a plane and go to a Louisville dog show that gets canceled, all in the name of breeding to the dog that I feel is the best dog at that moment in time. Oh yeah, I've done some things where people went, "You're doing what?" So I think the most famous crazy thing though was driving, I think it was 1,400 miles all the way up to Bellingham. And we had a puppy from that breeding that finished, that his registered name was Champion Kinder Tackles Bellingham, because of where we met to do that breeding. And time was of the essence, and this breeding was going to happen.
Thank you. I know that Ryan can share your pain about flying to Louisville and having a show canceled, right?
Flew to Louisville to have dinner with my good friend, and then we flew back home.
Oh, it was strange. I got off the plane, and when I got on the plane in California, the shows were going on. And I get off the plane and I get to the rental car counter, and the shows were canceled. And what? And it just got stranger from there.
Oh my goodness. All right. Ryan, how did you guys decide if y'all wanted to breed a bitch?
I mean, very similar to what Nancy said. It was really, it was the one that we kept that we had the most promise in, because, we were a family with limited funds, limited space, and we all worked and went to school. So, you had to really be very strict around what you kept and what you would want to move forward with. And, we've bred beautiful dogs that, a lot of them, and I'm sure everyone here could say the same, where, I really believe that the dogs are, they're pets and companions first and foremost before they're a show dog, while they're a show dog, and afterward. And there are just times where we've sold beautiful dogs into pet homes because we had wonderful homes for beautiful dogs that we just couldn't move forward with and didn't have show homes for. And so we just, kept what we thought was the best in that litter, if anything at all, and would move forward with that. There were times where bitches didn't get bred just because there wasn't something that we felt would be complementary to breed to the bitch. And so there were times where someone wouldn't get bred because we didn't feel like it would be like no litter would be better than a questionable litter. So we've missed out on some breedings just because we didn't feel that there was something readily available that we wanted to use on a particular bitch as well.
All right. Melissa, what about you? How do you determine if you want to breed a bitch?
Well, in the beginning, I had, like I said, 9 C-sections in a row, mainly from uterine inertia and strictures. But I was really trying to establish the line to get something to move forward with. So I was, at a point where the movement, I didn't want to lose the movement. The breed type was so beautiful that I didn't want to lose that. So I dealt with that. But we got past that, and now almost all of my litters are natural whelps now, 15 years later. But a lot of it was, if they had uterine inertia, the first time I wouldn't breed them again. A lot of my girls never got bred from. One of them I waited too long. She was the only champion bitch in the litter, and I really was saving her for something really, really special, but I hadn't found that special dog yet. And then before I knew it, she was 7, and I was like, we just missed that. So I don't wait anymore. I try to get at least a litter out of them before they're 5. Otherwise, we sometimes lose them. But when you breed 1 litter a year on average, that you miss them sometimes. You miss them. I had, pet homes are more important to me than show wins and numbers and litters. So, I had a beautiful bitch that had a litter that had beautiful puppies, finished several of the children, but a pet home came up, and I'll let a grand champion go, even though she's only 4 years old, almost 5. Even though I could have another litter out of her. Typically my girls have 1 litter, maybe 2. So I like to breed the ones that natural whelp. I have one that does, she sneezes and the puppies are done, other than in cutting the umbilical cord, they're there. And so she's had 3 litters for me. But that, is not often. That's one time in 20 years I've had one like that. So typically that's what I do. And I try to breed the better ones, but if the sister's out showing, I'll breed the sister at home. But again, it's few and far between. I don't have very many girls. So.
All right. Let's go over to how you pick a stud dog. So Nancy, how do you pick a stud dog?
Oh, it's hard. It really is. I'm always in a dilemma about that. As I said, I've mostly worked with Karen Dion. Um, she has a number of dogs. She has more dogs than I do. She has really good ones, really good ones. So I pretty much at the very beginning, I took Dee's advice and I followed her advice for the bitch that I got from her. And then after that, I again used, no, her daughter. That's right. I did go to Karen. That's when I started my relationship with Karen. And I've used about, let's see, probably 6 different dogs that Karen owns on litters that I've had. Some of the most interesting things I've done is my dapple bitch. It's hard because I'm not interested in red dapples. So that limits me to finding a black and tan dog to breed her to. And to be honest, there aren't very many good black and tan dogs out there right now in minis. When it came time to breed Luna, who's a very special dog, I think my most special dog that I have, had to find that black and tan. So Karen said, you know what, there isn't anything. Let's go back. I have frozen semen on, a dog that she had. And so we bred to Connor, who was alive in 1998 or whatever. And that worked really well. We tried the next time again, frozen semen, because there just wasn't anything that I wanted. That time we tried to breed to Suvi, like for Souvenir. Unfortunately, his frozen was low quality when it was thawed, so she missed. She didn't have any puppies. And I am again breeding her. When she comes in season this next time, I will breed her to frozen semen. And everybody will just have to wait to find out who it is. But it's going to be exciting for me. Salsa's an outcross. I mean, it was pretty much an outcross. And again, but it was a dog that Karen and Jeff bred that was an outcross for them. And they thought because Salsa's mother was, getting kind of close that we should go out. So I guess it's because my selections aren't very, there's not a lot out there for what I want to do. And Karen and I work really well together. So we find, and she advises me, and I try to follow her advice because she hasn't let me down yet.
All right, Kristen, how do you pick a stud dog?
Well, like Nancy said, it's a tough call sometimes, depending on what's available. I go to DCA every time, hoping to find this great dog that I've not seen before. There was one year I went and we were trying to find a stud dog for a bitch we had out as a special at the time. And we didn't actually like any of the specials. We saw a class dog that we wanted to keep our eye on. So sometimes it goes like that. If I find the right dog, I'm going to, I can drive to the Canadian border or get on a plane at a stupid time. It doesn't matter where the dog is. I do have frozen stored because I am pretty picky. Because I've had to bypass some dogs I greatly admired when I saw them in the show ring. But if I find out about some deal breaker health issues in the pedigree, then I'm sadly going to have to bypass that dog. Yeah. So, I do have frozen stored on 6 different dogs in 4 different repro facilities. It makes it a little bit easier. I've got one of the dogs that actually Polly Fleming bred to him 3 times in her later years. It's a dog I bred named Klaus. And he was super tightly line bred on her dogs. And I do have him stored, fortunately. I have an outcross dog stored, the one that I used that was so different than the type that I normally like, but he was what I needed. I have quite a bit of frozen stored on him, thank goodness, because he went down to Brazil and pursued a show career down there. I try to co-own dogs with people. That's worked sometimes, and other times I've had contracts broken no matter what. I don't like to keep males here because I have male drum at my house, And that limits me from keeping a nice male. So many times I will finish a young dog and I'll try to find a good pet home and hope that they will keep him intact. I've had it happen where, I let a young champion go for next to nothing. And in the contract, it was well agreed that I would be able to breed to him, and they violated the contract. So, that can happen. And it's a way that breeders try to keep their numbers down and keep everybody house dogs. But it's happened to me enough times to where I'm a bit soured on the experience. So, we do what we can, whether it's frozen, whether it's constantly keeping our eye out for a nice upcoming dog at DCA. I'm hoping that we have DCA in October because I'm shopping again. So hopefully there will, yes, yeah, hopefully there'll be some nice young dogs that have been waiting for their turn to go in the show ring.
Well, I've had trouble too, because I did approach a couple of people for a dog for Luna, for example, and they wouldn't cooperate with me, shall we say. So that is another problem. You have to have somebody that's willing to work with you, and sometimes they aren't. So that's the way it goes.
Yes, I've had a couple of wonderful co-owners that, some people that they came from having rescue dogs, and I had this really nice young champion, and I just knew that there was going to be drama with the boys that I do have here. And so I found him a pet home very, very soon in life. And I know they just wanted to neuter him and be done with it. And they actually, I've only asked to breed to him, I think twice now, and he's almost 6 years old. And, they're actually kind of into it now and kind of hoping. I was going to breed a bitch to him back in April, but they moved out of state. And with how weird the world was getting, I just thought, no, we're going to have to skip her, even though she only comes in season once every 12 months. So I think they're looking forward to next April. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Ryan, how did you guys pick a stud dog?
Well, I feel like we were pretty fortunate in that, when we move forward with our standard long hairs, being able to have more diversity and variety in similar lines, I would say, kind of going back to like Boondocks and Walmart and what, Solos have bred. I felt like we had some options, and I think it's great. And just being good friends with people in much more rare breeds, the difficulty you have in having options. There aren't a whole lot of dogs to pick from when you're looking. So I feel very fortunate in standard long hairs. Back when I was breeding more in the like late 90s and early 2000s, to feel like I had options. Moving forward, as I hope to get back into breeding again and having show dogs and being more in the ring as an exhibitor, I think what's really been helpful is having been judging for the last 15 years and being able to travel more around the country and see dogs and have my hands on so many dogs around the country, I think will alter how I move forward and pick stud dogs, because I realize that there's much more variety and options that I have available than I maybe have thought before. And so I'm excited about what that will look like, even, picking a new dog in the future just to have as a primary dog, and then looking at what I can breed to. I'm excited that I have gotten the opportunity to have hands on so many more dogs and really get to have a fuller picture of what my options are available to me.
Yeah, I have to say, when I judge, it really has altered how I do my breeding program. In some ways, just to have that availability, get your hands on dogs, and really be a little more picky.
Well, especially like in long hairs, you have so many where things can be artfully groomed out of them when you're looking at them, and you're missing so much that getting to actually put your hands on each one of these just for an initial impression. I mean, I wouldn't pick a stud dog without ever touching it necessarily, or not someone that I would really rely on for feedback if it were like overseas or something. But being able to really like do an initial go over of like each dog and saying, oh, wow, there is some front under all this hair, is really, it's exciting. Or finding one that you think, oh, that's a gorgeous dog. And then you look and you pull the hair back and it, it goes up to their spine practically. You think, how does this dog even stay, upright? It's been a great experience.
Melissa, how do you pick a stud dog?
Well, coming from having dachshunds since I was a kid, and one of my first dogs had IVDD, She went down. We did the surgery and tried to rehabilitate her and ended up having to put her down anyway. And my grandmother at the time had a dog that was a Dachshund, a smooth mini, that was so aggressive that the vet wouldn't even see it unless it was tranquilized. So health and temperament for me are paramount. And so, if I can't live with the dog, I'm not going to breed to the dog. Second, then I look at the outline and the movement. And when I say movement, do you mind if I show an example real quick?
All right. Yeah, absolutely.
This is Prue. She's the dog that I bred. She's Raybo's charmed one, and she's an Australian grand champion, but she went best in show under Pam Pete. That's the kind of movement I look for, because I feel like if you've got the movement and you still have the front and you still have the rear and coming and going, it's true. Pretty much I can put my hands on that dog and know what I'm going to feel. And so I really like to see a dog moving. I don't like to pick a dog from a stacked photo. The next thing I choose, though, is pigment. Pigment is huge for me. The reds are getting lighter and paler, and I like the deep, rich mahogany reds. So I look for dogs with good pigment, no snow noses, dark nails, black eye rims. Those are very important for me. And I like a dog that's prepotent. I like a dog that's going to stamp his type no matter what bitch he's bred to. And for the last 12 years, that's literally been Aaron for me. So I used him a lot. But I also have frozen on all the dogs that I originally imported from Australia. So I dip back into that if I think it's going to go well. But the last cog in the wheel, and only a small part of that cog, after all of those things I've mentioned, I also use DNA. So, I do OFA clear cardiac, I do OFA patella, I do surf. So, they're chicked. I do PRA DNA, and I do embark. Those are only a piece of the puzzle. So I won't throw a dog out for my breeding program if, they carry E. I'm not going to throw a dog out for that, especially if all those other check boxes are checked. So I tend to really put a high priority on health, temperament, outline, and movement before all of those things, but they're all very key in selecting the next dog.
Let's kind of segue into that. I'm glad that you brought that up, Melissa, because Kristen, I know you do a lot of health testing to get clearances, and say agree with her about temperament. So can you tell us kind of about what you do for your health testing?
Well, I'm pretty passionate about health clearances. I'm interested to learn more about Embark. That's interesting about doing Embark for my internet connection's unstable. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah,
yes.
You're okay.
Oh, okay. It's just giving me a false warning. Okay. What was I just going to say?
You were going to look into Embark.
Yeah,
talking about, yeah.
Do a lot of physical OFA health clearances, and not the Embark so much, because there are very few. And so for years because I'm involved in an all breed club and we hold OFA health clinics, I watched the breeders of the other breeds bring in entire litters of puppies in for early surf testing, and I with Jean Dodds in Garden Grove. And so, I started doing thyroid panels with her, segued into eye exams. I've been doing OFA cardiac for years, and I've started doing OFA advanced cardiac now with my older dogs, not just pre-breeding, but I follow them through. I have two 11-year-old siblings that they were just about to be tested March 21st again. I go once a year to a cardiologist and have their hearts listened to. I feel it's important to track your dogs even after their breeding career is over, because you don't want to be line breeding in the future on dogs that will develop, if they have mitral valve disease that comes in midlife, you don't want to line breed on those dogs. So, that's something I've added. I used to do just practitioner cardiac exams, and now I do advanced cardiac with a cardiologist and follow it through once a year with my older dogs. As far as chick registry is Canine Health Information Center. And to have a dog with a chick registry number, they have to be microchipped or have some form of permanent ID, like a tattoo would count. And the vet has to verify it. And in our breed, it's very easy to get a chick registry number. You only have to do OFA eye or surf or OFA patella. I also do OFA thyroid and OFA advanced cardiac. Emmy and I counted And over the years, we've had 32 different chick registry dogs in our breeding program. So at this point, I can look at my pedigrees, and it's not just the current dogs that we're showing. I have like probably several generations of dogs with chick registry numbers. So it's something that, you know, the more you test, the more you will sometimes see things that you go, what is this? Especially with eye things. I've learned a lot about what's a deal breaker issue and what's not. And you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it's good to have the information so you can track it. I'll use something called retinal folds in our breed. And they don't know what retinal folds do. They're often seen with young puppies, and they usually disappear by the time the dog is 2 or 3. And in some breeds, it can be cause for concern. In our breed, it doesn't affect vision, doesn't seem to do anything. And so you ask, well, why is it even important to know? I don't think it's wise to breed 2 dogs that had retinal folds as puppies together. So even though this is not a deal breaker issue, and maybe somebody would say, well, it's irrelevant, it's still good to know what you have so that you're not making breeding decisions without that knowledge. So that's part of why I'm passionate about doing a lot of OFA health clearances.
Mhm.
Nancy and Ryan, what about you guys? Do you guys have anything you want to add to health clearances?
I basically do eyes, turf, and have my vet check patellas, obviously when they're puppies, but right before breeding too, just to make sure everything's still there. And of course, I try to do enough research on stud dogs, and I know my own dogs and where they come from, that I wouldn't knowingly breed to anything that has IBDD back there, or epilepsy back there, or pes so, you know, those are all things that I'm concerned with, that I try to avoid at all costs.
Ryan, do you want to add anything to that?
Not too much. I realized that when I first started breeding, I was much younger and way more inexperienced and lacked a lot of knowledge in this department. And moving forward, I would definitely take more of an approach similar to what has been discussed here, just to have a better understanding of what's going on before breeding anyone that I've got. But just for the general health and welfare of any pet that I would place too, I'd want to do that with healthy dogs, obviously. And so that's really where I've put a lot more energy and knowledge into knowing the importance of that. And what continues to be available as science advances to create some of the healthiest dogs that I can.
All right, thank you so much. Let's
Can I add one more thing to that?
yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. So I also, am a bred with heart and breeder of merit and all that stuff. And I think with bred with heart, for the longest time, AKC bred with heart meant you health tested your dogs for the minimum requirements. And I was happy to see that finally this year, DCA agreed that these things were important enough to be a requirement for bred with heart. And I don't know how many people out there actually know that changed this year. But the requirements are now the cardiac, patella, DNA, PRA, and SURF or chick. No, wait, SURF. Yeah, SURF. Sorry. And so those things are required now if you're going to be bred with heart. And I think that is a great thing. But I also think that Dachshund Club of America, in their magazine, they list litters. People announce their litters and puppies for sale. I think those dogs should also have the parents' health information listed, and if they're doing those things, because I think that's important to set an example. And so I just wanted to mention that.
No, I'm glad that you did. I know that I've worked with, we're trying to get a panel put together about health, and we have some excellent dachshund fanciers and breeders, a long time, very involved people with Renee Lara and Danny Burke and Denny Van Hook. You know, we're trying to find the time that we can all come together to discuss, because I know that DCA is, rolling out those health requirements so that we can discuss those. We're just trying to get everybody in the same place at the same time to do that discussion. So I'm glad that we've had, touched on a little bit, and I appreciate you, you guys, you're sharing what you do, your health testing. Let's go over to what has been your experience with natural breedings versus AIs or side-by-sides or TCIs or frozen semen. Is there one that's been more successful for you, or one that you prefer to do? versus the others. Nancy, I know you said you were getting frozen semen, and that seems to have worked well for you. What is your preferred method?
Well, I've done all of them. Okay, all different types. It's not that I have a preferred method. It's kind of like what I have to do to breed to a certain stud dog. Obviously, if the semen's frozen, that's my only choice. I do surgical implantation of frozen semen. Then, except for the one time where the dog semen itself just wasn't good enough, I've been successful with each of those tries. I've done fresh chilled semen a lot. That was our basic means when I used Karen Dion stud dogs because she's in Washington State. I'm here on the East Coast. So, I'm not going to fly my bitch out there or vice versa. So I've done, and every single time I've used fresh chilled semen, I've had a litter. With my own dog, Wizard, that I bred Salsa to this time, her puppies. He's kind of a newbie at all this, so we did a side-by-side AI at the vet's office for him. My vet said she's going to try to teach him how to do it better next time. Anyway, I said I want to see what you're going to do there. kind of a wild child he is. So anyway, so I've done all of them except the TCI. I've never done the transcervical. But except for one miss, I've had puppies every time, any method that I need to do. So.
All right. Thank you. Kristen, what about you? What do you like to do?
Well, I'm going to get success if I do a natural breeding, but like Nancy said, sometimes you do what you have to do. I've moved frozen from one facility to another. I'm always in search of a repro clinic that's actually going to get the job done. And I had a chat with one repro vet last year because I had 3 misses in 3 years. With one bitch, I did, I think 8 different progesterone tests. I did 2 TCIs exactly when they said. And I came up with one puppy that was absorbed. I had a chilled semen breeding at the same clinic that failed. In the meantime, during that same span of time, I had males that when they were collected and shipped, their sperm counts were 1.2 billion or 1.3 billion, which is fantastic for a dachshund. And I had a bitch bred naturally that had 9 puppies. So the vets started to say, oh, well, I see some failures with the AKC show dogs, and I see more success. He has a lot of Frenchie and Bulldog clients come to this clinic in Southern California. And I said, well, I told him about the bitches that when they're bred naturally and how they conceive. He suggested I do a surgical next time. Actually, my only successes with frozen have been with TCI and with a clinic that's 600 miles away from me that has a great success rate. And I think that's the important thing, is to find out what the actual success rate is and go to where they're successful with whichever method. If they're better at TCI, you go there. If they're better at surgical, you go there. And I'm trying to evaluate. I have a couple of dogs frozen where I'm down to 1 or 2 breedings each on them. And it's very dicey trying to figure out how to best use this without wasting it. So, but if I do my own breedings, I can have 7, 8, 9, 10 puppies. So I have a little bit more faith in natural breedings, but you don't always get the luxury of doing that. That's the easiest, but it's not necessarily what is the best thing to do for that particular bitch.
Right. Ryan, what about you guys? Did y'all ever do any frozen or anything, or did you guys just do like side-by-side AIs? What did you guys do when you were breeding?
Yeah, early on it was either natural breedings or side-by-side. But again, I think that, and like what Nancy was saying, I mean, if it's the only option available for frozen, whether the dog's far away or has since died, and that's all that's available, that's what you do. And Kristen, what you're saying just around doing your research around which clinic is really going to be most successful for what you need, I think is very important. Mm-hmm. But in the end, it all ends up kind of, there's a piece of it that's kind of just a gamble. And you hope for the best and do what you can in terms of research and best available options and try and keep it as optimal of, situation as you can. But, in the end, it's still a gamble.
Mm-hmm. Melissa, what about you? I think you're muted. See if I can unmute you. All right, try now.
Go.
I don't know how that happened.
There we go.
Okay, so side by side AIs. That's my favorite. I've done all of it except TCI. Both my vets have TCI wands, and they're always broken when we want to try it. So I don't have faith in that they know how to use it anyway, because if they don't use it that often, then it's always broken. Then it's not something I'm going to go with. But I like side by side AIs the best because being that I had an older stud, I never knew when his sperm count was going to start going down. And so this way I could collect him, check it under the microscope, make sure his counts were good. And at the end, I was happy if we got 300,000. I had a hemocytometer and everything so that we could, guess, approximately what the count would be. And if it was 300,000, we'd go for it. And this way, if the bitch missed, I would know that it wasn't him, or that, my timing was off or whatever. But, that's some of my bitches with strictures and inertia and all that kind of stuff. It's hard to know whether or not they're going to get pregnant, especially some of my tightly lined bred ones that are on that initial line that I brought over. They had a little more complication with getting pregnant. So yeah, I would say natural, then I'm sorry, side by side AI, then natural. And then we also have frozen, and I've done frozen several times, and I've gotten several litters, but I've also missed a couple. And that's all literally timing. My bitches seem to be a little higher on the progesterone scale, like 25, before I've bred them the first day and gotten litters of 5. But if I breed them when they're at 5 and 6 and 7, when the vet says breed now, I don't get anything. So I think my bitches ovulate a little bit later on the progesterone scale.
Excellent. I'm going to skip down to the raising puppies section just for time's sake. So just kind of let you know if you've taken any notes, that's where I'm going to skip down to. So, we've gotten our, we've gotten our breedings, and our puppies have arrived, and they've all survived, maybe, or maybe they haven't, I don't know. So we're at evaluation time. So what age do you prefer to evaluate your puppies? As keeper puppies, or breeding stock, or for the ring? Whatever your method is, what age, Nancy, do you like to evaluate your puppies?
Yeah, I look at them at birth, just do a quick check of, length of shoulder blade versus upper arm, ribbing, keel. I just check those at birth and make a few notes on that. But I don't officially start evaluating till around 8 weeks. They haven't never even been on a table then, so I just look at the 8-week mark as the time for, let's get used to the table, and I'd use a stacking box, and get treats, make it a happy thing. I have my husband video the experience so that maybe I can get a still shot, and it's decent, of each puppy. And I do that weekly. They get better and better at it. Karen and I talk, because I do work with her on this a lot, and she's really good at seeing things I don't see, and vice versa. So we just look for trends. Obviously, Dachshunds are a front breed, so I'm looking for fronts that are getting bigger. At 8 weeks, mini long hairs don't have much, okay? But at 9 weeks, you maybe want to see a little tiny bit of something happening there, and 10 weeks, a little bit more. So I'm looking for a trend in the direction that I want that puppy to get to, if I were to keep a puppy or recommend a puppy to a co-owner that we could show together or whatever. So that's kind of my technique. I don't make a final selection though until I can get a puppy on a leash and watch it move, because just like Melissa said, the act is wonderful, but unless they have that movement, they keep that outline. Although young puppies, it's hard to see that, to be honest with you. They don't walk well enough. But you try to get a few steps, so you can say, yep, keep in the top line. Front doesn't disappear when it starts to move. They aren't crippled, rear or front. They aren't big out there like trucks or narrow or whatever. You can get a general idea of their movement, and I don't make any decision until I can see both things.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Kristen, what about you? What age do you prefer, and how do you evaluate your puppies?
Well, when I was brand new, I was under the impression that one put puppies on a table at 8 weeks and it was a magic age and we made decisions and that was it. And what I learned from Polly when she became my mentor, she taught me something very important about evaluating puppies. She didn't believe that 8 weeks was a magic age. She'd take a little bit of a look, but I like to sit and watch them as they matured more. Judy Anderson was the same way. She told me, I don't want to look at your smooth puppies because she said they were very insignificant because she was used to wire coat. She didn't want to see them until about 10 to 12 weeks for the first time. And that's really when Polly would also start to pay attention. Polly would bring a chair over to my X pen and she'd watch my puppies move. And I'd put them on the table and stack them. And she'd say, I don't want to look at that. I want to look at them in the X pen and moving. And she taught me that if I had, weed out the pets first. I mean, there's no reason to keep a puppy that's obviously not going to make the grade. 10 to 12 weeks is a reasonable time to make that decision. But she taught me to run on puppies and grow them out and really make sure. And I think more of 4 months is when you can start becoming comfortable that a puppy is going to turn out. I've actually put points on a puppy before I sold him to somebody to make sure. And one time with that outcross breeding I did, that was a big outcross. I had 9 puppies. And because it was such a big outcross and they all look so different at 8 weeks, I ran them on until I believe I had 6 of them still, and they were 6 months old. 2 of them were going to show homes in Europe and Russia, and I needed to wait until their permanent dentition came in and was very sure about that. But I still had some others that I was sorting out. So I had this teenage gang of puppies, and Judy and I went to the Desert Valley Specialties. I had to bring extra X pens and extra crates. I mean, it was fun, but it was a lot of work. And I think it's easier to just say, on the day it turns 8 weeks, it's out of here. But especially with an outcross, it's very important to watch them develop, watch them move. Sometimes the puppy that you like quite a bit early on is going to dramatically change. And for me, I tell people on my wait list for pets, don't bother me until they're about 10 to 12 weeks, because I have vet checks to do. I do the Gene Dog's modified vaccine protocol, so that doesn't even start until 10 weeks. And I do certified exams on the whole litter, and my eye specialist likes to wait until they're about 10 or 11 weeks. So I can't really get with decisions until we get to that juncture where the vet exams start and I can rally some people together and we can all sit and watch the puppies move, because that's what Polly taught me, is to let them grow up some more and watch them move.
Okay. Ryan, what about you guys? How did you evaluate your puppies? And at what age?
Yeah, I agree with what was already been said. A big part of it is, there isn't just any special moment where you think, here's the day that you pick your puppy, but you really look at them moving around the house, running around in the yard, how they interact with each other, with their, with the other dogs, with themselves, because it's not even just so much just what they look like standing there, or if their shoulder placement is right and they're developing forechest, but it really also falls down to like temperament.
Yeah.
And how they interact with the other dogs. And again, being in a place where we really couldn't have, many dogs or run things on, we really had to make, some tough choices where there were, maybe 2 or 3 out of a litter that you'd want to run on longer. But because we had, wonderful pet homes for them, and that we really just kind of bit the bullet and picked the one and placed some of the others in pet homes. I find it very valuable to get input from other people looking at the litters. I find that when I have the litter myself, I very much fall in line of like the cute one, or the one that's got the sweetest, cutest temperament. And I'm thinking, oh, that's the one, but it's really not. So it's hard sometimes to see aside from that, like when you just want to, the one that you want to just squish the most is the one that you want to keep, not necessarily the most correct one. But I do laugh because a quick story, my mom whelped a litter for Carlos Puig, a standard wire. Her name was Miss Fish. She had a register name. I don't even know what it was. And she had 10 puppies. And I think she was bred to something maybe from Kelly Williams. So she had 5 boys and 5 girls. And, in exchange for whelping this litter, my mom got to pick whichever one she wanted. And so we had this one, and, her name was Noodles. We ended up finishing her, and she won at specialties and that. And she had a nice career. But I think Carlos had asked, well, how did you pick that one? And she says, well, one day I was trying to close the basement door and it wasn't closing. I kept trying to close it. And I opened it and I realized the dog was there and it fell down the flight of stairs. And so I kept that one because I was afraid that I didn't want to sell someone a dog that might have had something broken. And so that's why we kept that one. But it was just like the silliest story because, you know, not a whole lot of educational thought went into that one.
That's so funny. Yeah, you know, it's not always the cute one, but you hope it's not the mouthy one or the bossy one or the
Yes.
pain in the ass, you know. You're hoping it's not that one.
Those
Melissa,
ones turn out to be good show dogs, though. When they're really naughty, I find that they're the
yeah,
easiest ones.
they're the best.
You have something to work with there.
Right. Melissa, what about you? How do you evaluate and what age?
So I tend to look at them as they're first starting to stand. The earlier they stand and can stand up and stay standing and stand still, those are the ones that I start watching early. But yeah, I don't look at them. I stack them weekly, but I don't look at them on a table at 8 weeks. That plus or minus one day doesn't work on my lines. I've tried that for 20 years and they don't look like what they look like at 8 weeks at the end. Mine are typically 12 weeks. I look again at 16 weeks and then I quit looking. They go through so many bad things that sometimes I think, oh, I kept the wrong one. You know, when they're 6 months and going through the gangly stage, I sometimes think I did a disservice keeping that one, and then, you know, comes back around. So yeah, I typically 12 weeks, 16 weeks, and then quit looking. And then about 13 months, they're back together to where I can start showing them. And again, the other thing that I do during that time is I just watch the ones that can not just stand and look pretty, but stand still. If they stand for a few seconds and sit, or if they move a lot, the ones that seem to stand still are the ones that tend to be the most balanced. And then I do watch them move a little bit, but you know, the puppies, they're usually jumping around and playing and running and jumping more than they are trotting. But if they do have a trot early on, I again put a little star by their name. And the one with the most stars is typically the ones I keep the longest. But yeah, I typically don't sell for show, and the very last dog I sold for show actually finished her championship before I sold her too. That's when I'm sure. And so yeah, I know that I can put up with a lot of stuff and wait and be patient and grow it out, but it seems like I'm afraid nobody else is going to have that kind of patience because, like I said, I would have placed them at 6 months and then happy that I didn't. So I don't look at them. But except for those, you know, key points, 12, 16, and then 13 months.
Well, let's move into that about getting our, you know, not looking at them and figuring out when they're ready for that show ring. I know that some people put up pictures of dogs that are 7 or 8 months and go, "What do you think?" And I'm like, why did you even put that up there? Where, you know, sometimes they put them up, they're stunning, and you know they're beautiful young, and you know all of the things that go into it. So let's talk about, you know, getting them into the show ring for the first time if we feel like they're ready as puppies. You know, what's been your experience with that, Nancy?
Well, I do not show young puppies, real young puppies is kind of my rule. I think the youngest dog I've ever shown is like 10 months old, and that's just because he was ready to show. He looked great. He didn't care about anybody or anything. He thought everything was wonderful. So I took him out and he finished very quickly. But most of the time I wait till 13, 14, 15, sometimes 18 months before I really start a puppy. In the meantime, that's the worst thing about this pandemic right now is that I feel a little limited in getting my puppies out for social experiences. I have, even though, you know, with Lowe's and Home Depot, Tractor Supply, those kind of places that let you bring your dogs in. I have taken my pups to Lowe's this time, even though when people come over, I just back away from the cart and say, go right ahead, you can pet them, just don't get near me. And then and they have their masks on, you know, so it's okay. I'm okay. But I don't feel quite as free to do it as often as I like to do right now. I also, you know, miss the shows because I will take puppies after they've had their shots and everything. I'll take 4-month-old, 5-month-old puppies to shows and let them just sit on my lap, you know, let them have a positive experience. I think that's important. these puppies now, I have a good friend that lives just 5 miles from me that also shows dogs, and I've taken them over to her house so they get a different place to be. I have 4 different places here at the house that I switch them all at, so they get a different scenery every day. 2 places in the house and 2 different places on the property where I have their pens and everything set up. So they get a little different view of the world as often as I can. So um, lead training, that's hard, for puppies, but when they get to be 12, 13 weeks old, I'll take them on a little light lead with an adult dog, and hopefully they'll follow the dog. And if they really aren't ready, then I quit. I don't want any negative associations with, bucking and bronking and, that kind of thing. So we do that when they're ready for it. So that's about it.
All right. Kristen, what about you? What do you do?
Well, when my daughters were younger, it was so easy because we were out just about every weekend when they were doing juniors, and it was so easy. We would have the pups in an X pen. I'm a firm believer in not waiting too long. In fact, I took a really cool seminar. The first year DCA was at Callaway Gardens. There was an early puppy socialization seminar, and I know it was discussed that they feel there's a critical period of socialization, and that window closes roughly at 11 to 12 weeks. And I've always felt that the risk of an under-socialized standard smooth is far greater than the risk of a puppy dying from a disease, because especially with standard smooths, if you don't expose those puppies to the world early in life, you can get suspicious temperaments. So I always just brought the puppies with me. If we were going to a weekend away in Northern California, the pups would go as early as I dared. And we'd have the shade tent out, and Judy would look at the pups as they played. I wasn't always so great about leash training. In fact, Emmy likes to gripe that, I'd be bringing these puppies all these months to these shows and exposing them to the environment, which is important. But I never really made them go on a show lead and actually gate with their head up. So that's my Achilles heel, and I've got to get better. Since this whole pandemic thing, I have 2 8-month-old siblings that I know that we're not supposed to show them really early. It's a temptation to show them early. I think it helps especially with standard smooths, it helps their temperament. If you show them lightly here and there, maybe at specialty shows where there's not a lot of pressure. And these guys normally would have already been in the ring once or twice. And I walked them at field trials, thank goodness, right before this all hit in March. They were 4 months old at the end of field trial season in California, and I walked them with the other dogs, thank goodness, because they've had no exposure to shows. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. It's been good because I've watched them go through some gangly, ugly stuff, and now they're coming out of it, and I'm going, well, just as well I wasn't tempted to show them too early. But when you're at shows every weekend, as I was, 10 years ago, Emmy was a top ranked junior, and we were at shows just about every weekend. And you have that temptation to slip a 6-month-old puppy in. And I do it sometimes to support my Dachshund Club. I'm the secretary of Dachshund Club of California. And I'm famous for, maybe I'll sell this puppy as a pet, but to support the club, we might show it once just to be nice. So, sometimes I'll show a puppy that I know is too young just to kind of see what they look like in the ring too, is also a valuable experience. So yeah, I've done it all different ways, and I am forced to have these puppies wait now because of the pandemic.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of people that held their puppies out for DCA, and now they're going to age out of the puppy classes by the time October rolls around.
Yeah, that's exactly. I realized back in April, I went, you know what? They'll never be in the puppy class ever. It's sad, but bread buy's good too. So.
Absolutely. I'm going to switch over to Melissa first, and then Ryan, I'm going to come back to you so I can get your viewpoints on this from a judge's perspective on puppies in the ring. So Melissa, let's go over to you on what you like to do to get your puppies ready for the ring.
I do like to take them to the show one time, whether it's a puppy match or like the 3 to 6 month class or that kind of thing, and just go one time. But we try to make sure it's fun. If they're not having it, we don't participate. But they're entered, we go, we sit, we let people feed them, and we let them be puppies in the ring. I don't try to stack them. I don't try to make them stand a certain way or anything like that. If they want to play, they play. I look silly, they look silly, and I try to make it fun times. The next time they come back out, which might be, when they're 9 months old, that they're familiar with it enough that they remember that it was a good time. And with some dogs, I've actually leash broken them in the classes at 9 months old and gotten the first major. But my dogs typically, I know which ones I can do that with. They trust me. They've been stacked. I work with them a lot. I have neuropathy in my legs, so walking is difficult, especially when you're trying to train a puppy that wants to trip you. I have to walk with a walker, and so training them to walk doesn't happen very often here. So I have a limited ability to do that. But that's also taught me too that keeping a puppy that doesn't have show shine, that doesn't want to do it, that hates the lead, that um, it doesn't have confidence. I don't fight with them. I just let them go as pets because you can always, tone down an overzealous puppy, but you can't put show shine on a dog that just doesn't have it. And so I typically have puppies that, are easy to take on the lead for the most part. And I do socialize them here with a lot of people coming into my house. I've got nurses and supply guys and stuff for the dialysis. So they are always interacting with lots of different people. So that part I don't have trouble with. But yeah, the lead breaking is hard for me. But I've just learned what my limitations are.
Thank you so much. Ryan, let's go over to you and talk about your experience. Now, everything they described, I'm sure you've seen in your judging ring at one point or two. So let's talk about your perspective as a judge on having puppies in the ring. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to puppies being in the ring, and I understand the various reasons why people would show their puppies, whether it's to get them some exposure or like in my case, when I was very new to showing and got my, my first show dog, 6 months and 1 day, I can enter, I'm ready to go. And so, you get out there and you want to be competitive. I think the big thing though, Melissa was referencing was just going out there and having fun. And I think that if you are going to show puppies, you have to reevaluate what your expectations are of what your performance is going to be and how well how successful you may be at that show. Unfortunately, there's been such a drop in the amount of confirmation training classes or people being involved in other aspects of the sport, whether it's field work or agility or rally or whatnot, where we get to work with our dogs and train them in other ways so they kind of know some basic stuff. That doesn't really happen so much anymore. So people show up and they have their 6 month and 1 day old puppy on the leash for, maybe the first or second time, depending on whether you're judging Saturday or Sunday. And, they come in and the dog is bucking bronco and not really getting around the ring. It hasn't been exposed much. You're in a noisy fairground building or whatnot, might be cold in there. And it sets the dog up for such failure long term, I think. And so there's a real difference between getting them some exposure versus really making it challenging for them to develop a real show sense of self. And so I think for new people, it's, really to look at what your expectations are of that show. And I hope that people who have new dogs, that they're working with breeders like us who have provided them with these show prospects, some real guidance around how to view the show world and what's really competitive and what's not. And so again, use it as a more of a training experience versus something where you feel like you're going to go in there and be really competitive. I think the other piece is that Dachshunds are a slow developing breed overall. And, you're not going to see the depth of chest that you may want and them drop down on themselves as much as you'd want. And then just from the lack of training, they're not going to be flying around the ring with beautiful reach and drive, even if they have it in some instances. So it's really just evaluating what your expectations are of entering that ring when the dog is so young.
I'm glad that you brought that up because I don't know about you guys, but I know me, especially when I was newer and had puppies in the ring and I was very excited, really kind of pushed them in too early and ended up ruining a few dogs early on. And so, ruined it for them being show dogs and, I don't know if I broke their temperament, all kinds of stuff can go on. And so I try to be a lot more patient now. And I mean, I've got dogs that are 2.5 years old that need to get in the ring at this point, which I normally don't like to do, but that's kind of where we are. So I would be, caution new people about, there's a very fine line, showing, getting those dogs in the ring too early. Let's start our wrap up because I did promise you 2 hours, and we're pushing right at 2. So really fast, are there any breeding books or articles you personally like to use and recommend? I have a few that I use every time that I'll kind of thumb through when I'm waiting for litters to be born or anything. So is there anything that you want to share with everybody out there, stuff you like to use? Nancy, you have something?
Well, I use I read a lot of the Myra Savant Harris stuff. I don't have her books, but I am a member of her Facebook page, and so they have file after file after file, and so I read all of them right before every litter, make sure everything is fresh in my mind. So I really like her stuff a lot, and I've learned a lot from her, and Karen gives me that advice too. The one book is probably nobody would be surprised. It's Bruce and Dee Hutchinson's book, The Complete Dachshund. I like that one. But as far as breeding and so forth, Myra's stuff is what I rely on.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up her Facebook page, because there is a Facebook page. I know that they had to switch that group over to another, group about 2 months ago. So yeah, even if you're experienced or brand new, if you're not a part of that group, put it in the feed on this video and we'll direct you to that. I read that a lot too. Kristen, what about you? Do you have any books or articles you like to use for reading?
Well, with Facebook, I also like the Canine Fertility, Reproduction, and Neonatal Issues group. I like that very much. And Emmy, being a biology teacher, I've turned her on to, and sponsored her into that group because she's expecting her first litter, and she loves it. There's some really tragic situations, but you learn quite a bit from it. I've been breeding for 26 years, and I mean, every day I open up that group and there's something new and interesting. The book that I had my husband buy, this is the second, let me see, okay, it's not glaring now. When I bought my first Dachshund, my husband bought this book for, this is actually the replacement because I wore it out. Literally, I broke the spine and read it so many times. Other resources, and I have tons of these. In fact, this is an American Dachshund magazine from 1956. I bought some of Harry Tuff's collection at one point. I have some other, Dan Burke had boxes of American Dachshund magazines from his mom, and he just wanted a minimal donation to his club. So I have, I think, from 1954, to where the American Dachshund ended. That was our publication with Dachshund Club of California when it was founded in 1932 with Gracie Greenberg. We had the American Dachshund. Other resources, I've got Kay Ladd's book, various books that I loved reading. There is, as far as the specifics of breeding, I couldn't find it because, again, I literally wore it out and broke it, but it has the Vishlas on the cover. It's a very practical book, hands-on whelping. I think it has the word whelping in it. And I literally wore that copy of that book out with my first litters. So there are a lot of resources, and since Facebook, that's, the field is wide open with these wonderful reproduction groups.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that too. Thank you for that. Ryan, do you have any recommendations for anything for breeding?
I don't have any specific ones. There are so many books out there for not only just Dachshunds, and really getting to look at the history of the breed, what they're intended for, and then seeing so many good examples of the breed, I think is very helpful just to start to train your eye to look for what you may want to have in your life as a Dachshund when you get started. I know that I had one, it was just called Canine Reproduction when my first litter when I was still in high school. And I remember similar to Kristen, I was in school. So I was highlighting everything, and I highlighted it. I had all the pages marked, and I was ready for anything that would go wrong when the first litter was born, until I freaked myself out. And, every time the dog yelped or burped or something, I would panic and think we had to run to the vet. So I think even more so, it's you can get educated and look at books and read that, but it's really find good mentors that you can rely on and talk to and get advice from. I encourage people to stay at the shows, hang out with people in the grooming areas, talk to people who have been in the sport a long time, to just kind of pick their brain and hear what they have to say. You're going to get a wide variety of opinions and ideas, but really just take in what you can and you know, like learn from it and, you know, leave what doesn't work for you. But I think that that's going to be the best way, is just to build relationships with people and learn from everyone that's around us. There's such a wealth of knowledge from everybody, whether it's Dachshunds or other breeds. I really just encourage people to be a sponge and, you know, talk to people.
All right, thank you so much. Melissa, do you have any recommended breeding books or anything you'd like to share with everybody?
Yes, and mine's going to probably be a little longer because again, I'm an introvert and a data person, so this is what I live for, right? My favorite one, ABCs of Dog Breeding, Claudia Orlandi. I love this book. It's huge. And what I did so that I wouldn't wear it out is I made copies of all the pages, all the tests, so I could write, scribble, and take notes and not ruin this copy. But for those of you that can't find the book, AKC now has a canine college, and it's basically that book split up into sections, and you can take the courses for free. And if you want to take the test, you can actually get a certificate. That costs money, but you can take the test and actually get your certificate to say that you passed, which I think is pretty cool because again, free and it's online. And I'll give the links to Lexa so that she can post all these. But it's basically the caninecollege.akc.org, and you can just search for breeder courses on there. The next one I would recommend people go to if they just want to learn movement from your PC only, because it doesn't work on mobile, was the original Dachshund movement flash animation that I created. I don't even know how many years ago now, but it's at sworab.com/D for Dachshund. So sworab, SWORAB.com/D for Dachshund. And you have to authorize Flash to be installed on your PC because it's an old program. People don't use it anymore. I just haven't updated it. But you can mouse over and learn a lot from that. And one thing we didn't get to talk about too much was progesterone timing of the bitch. I did want to hit on that a little bit because there are two different kinds of progesterone testing out there. You have the IDEX and the mini, oh God, what is it called? Anyway, mini Vita, it is. And so the charts are completely different. And I'll send a link to Lexa for that because the breeding number for one chart might be 5 and 7, and it's 25, 30 on the other one. So you have to know from your vet which test you're running. And if you go from one vet to the other because today you're closer to this vet and the other day you're closer to this vet, they could be running 2 different tests. And so you really need to go to the same vet when you do your progesterone level testing, so that you actually, in-house testing can vary even for testing to make sure you get the timing just right. The other thing that I'm going to give a link for Lexa to list in there are semen collection kit breeding supplies. I use Exodus. They have great semen extenders with and without antibiotics. They have semen shippers. And the thing I like about them is that the original extender, when you get it sent to you, it does not have to be in a cooler, chilled, and all the expense of that, keeping it in the refrigerator. It's literally a mix, and you mix it when you need it. So it can be shipped regular mail. And then you ship the sperm out, which I've been doing for 20 years. Like I said, microscope, hemocytometers, all these things. I used to collect my dogs and just put in the refrigerator just to see how long I could get it to last, so that I would know if somebody got their semen. I had one that was shipped on a Thursday, was supposed to arrive on a Friday. It was supposed to go to Florida, ended up going to Chicago, and didn't get there till Monday. And I pulled out my sample from my refrigerator, still swimming. So we used it, and she got, I think, 4 or 5 puppies out of the litter. So, I do a lot of that. And so I'll send a link to the supplies that I used for that because I learned a lot from their website and techniques. And then the other part of that equation is vaginal cytology, where you do diestrus testing on the bitch. I have learned a lot about my bitches and when they actually ovulate. Numbers are just numbers until you have more data. And the progesterone level would come in 5 to 7. The vet would say breed now. And then I would do this diestrus testing. So I would take my own vaginal swabs. I'm going to put a link on there about how to do that. And then read them on, I stain them and read them on the microscope. And I would find out the day of diestrus. And you can literally go back 3 to 5 days and know when the bitch was the most fertile. Compare that to your numbers. And my bitches are usually most fertile around 25. And that's on the NGL scale. So I learned to breed my bitches later from that. And then the other thing that gives you is if you add 57 days to that diestrus date, you can pretty much pick your whelp date from that. It's literally plus or minus 57 days, plus or minus 1 day, 57 days after diestrus. So, you know, when I tell somebody that she's going to have her puppies on Christmas Day, and she's like, no, she can't. No, and no, she's gonna, and she always does. Like, I've never been off more than 1 day plus or minus with that. So I'm going to put a link on there, send for Lexa to post on how to do that and how to read them. And it actually has classes. So you can look at the slide and it'll tell you how far along the bitch was and whether or not, if she bred on this day and that day, but her slide looked like this, do you think she's pregnant? And then it'll tell you the answer. So you train your eye about how to read the slides and know when your bitch is most fertile. I think that's about it. On my favorites, and I'm happy to share those with you.
Yeah, those sound like some amazing resources. I'm going to add a few just for people out there. I really like, make sure I got it on my camera, this book of canine reproduction. As you can see, my puppies really like it too. And I have 2 of these, like, you know, Kristen, this one's about worn out, but I keep it with my whelping supplies. Another one I picked up when I was very first breeding is the Harris book that looks like this, Breeding a Litter. It's got some stuff in it, you know, general stuff. But one of my new favorite books is that Kenny Lloyd actually sent me about a year ago, and it's newer, and it has all kinds of stuff in it, and it's just canine reproduction and neonatology. I think you can get this off of Chewy, Amazon, and this has, if you're easily grossed out, maybe be careful where you're thumbing through, because it has in detail pictures of things that can go right, things that can go wrong. And there's all kinds of charts and stuff in the back. It's almost too smart of a book for me, but I'm going to eventually wade my way through all of it and understand it one day, maybe when I'm grown up. And so it's a really great resource. Well, I want to thank all of you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your insight and your wisdom and your knowledge, sharing with everybody, especially when it comes to breeding and all of those good things. One thing I do want to add before I get off, and I have it sitting right here, so I put in all the other videos. Make sure you have this. I know that everybody on the panel has one of these, and I just ordered 3 more that should be here in the next few days. So we're going to be using that when we start talking about our standards. But that's always, I always keep that around when I start doing my breedings. I'm sure everybody else on the panel uses it quite a bit. So anyway, thank you so very much. I really appreciate you guys and admire all that you do for the breed. And thank you for all of this today. So I'm going to have you hang back while I stop the live feed. Thank you, everybody out there, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll let you guys say goodbye, but stay back for me.
Bye.